All right, then I may start to resolve a little bit from the questions, and you will be asked, as already been told afterwards, to finalize this the questionnaire once again. Okay, and therefore you see from this presentation already it's been updated this month. So if you try to resume this presentation by looking into the video, which is in the fitness platform inside, you will recognize that some of the slides are different because I updated them today, and the only chance to catch a video would be today, which we don't. So there is a slight difference in these things. So this is what I'm going to tell you, a little bit about the history, overall significance, meaning what is packaging, where is it for, something about the terminology, because this is also important, the functions that packaging has to be done. I will refrain from quantitative figures today. So the functions are only in a qualitative way, and final conclusions. So we start with a history, and you see that the oldest things in packaging are in the material sector. So they developed ceramic. Is it? Here is it. Ceramics already more than 10,000 years ago. But the main development has been taking place over the last, let's say, 100 years. In parallel to the materials, we have the manufacturing technology, which started much later because in the past everything was done by hand, later on automatically. And the main thing that has happened in the past was the development of plastics manufacturing, plastic packaging manufacturing, which took most of the effort. We also have the food methods, the method to treat food, which was again already developed very early by very simple methods like sorting, drying, cooling, and so on. And today we are talking about aseptic packaging and modified atmosphere packaging. And what took the longest time was the supermarkets, the retail. The first pre-packed goods were already sold in the US in 1870s, while the supermarkets in Europe did not start to develop before 1948 after World War II, whereas in the US we already had the first self-service stores in 1916. So just a brief view. If you would like more, have to have more information and so on, just ask me. That's would spend too much time for this. This has been added in relation to the older presentation, the new targets that appear. In the past, the main problem was to keep the food consumable. Today, we would like to have it in high quality, fresh, and for a certain shelf life. In the past, it was a so-called linear economy where we had a problem and we had to solve the problem. That was all. Today, we have also to solve the problem on how to deal with the waste, how to recycle the waste to reduce the amount of resources we need. And this is also abbreviated via the acronym EPR, which is Extended Producer Responsibility, which means that you do not only have to produce as a producer, but you also have to think about the recycling. So here's some milestones. So the Club of Rome, everybody knows about this. This was 1972. And already there, the French began to implement something from this knowledge into their law. Today, we have a lot of regulations and directives which deal with all these things. I also do not want to go into detail. Only some facts, for instance, we, in the meantime, detected the problem of microplastics in the environment, which is one of many environmental problems we have to deal with. All right, so just to make an interim conclusion here, packaging means that all comes together. This means the materials, the manufacturing, the processes for the food, and also the protection of the resources. And yes, especially for the latter, we are not at the end, by far not. So this means that you need to know all these facts more or less, first in a general way, then in a more specialized one, to have an idea what packaging really means. And packaging is not just a can that is being thrown away into the waste. Good. So this is a picture that symbolizes this. And in the past, I didn't have this circle because it was still a representative of the linear economy. Today, we have to think about the recycling and other ways to recover the waste of the packaging we have. What remains a problem is recycling of food waste. We try to do something like composting, for instance, but it's not a true recycling process. And therefore, we have to be more careful, even if we forget it, on food losses than on losses on packaging. But okay, it's not always the same. So we are talking about different environmental problems, and we have to find the priorities, but this will not be the subject of this lecture today. Okay, so the next point is the different types of packaging we're dealing with. So you know, mostly consumer packagings, that's what you buy in the store. You have food packaging, you have non-food, you have pharmaceutical packaging, you have cosmetics packaging, all that what you buy as a single item. But we also have industrial packaging, which are, let's say, transport packaging, which is business to business transportation in most cases. We also have chemical packaging. That's all different from the other things. And what I wanted to say here, just as a fact, it means that every type of packaging and even every single package needs different packaging functions. That means you cannot use the same package for all different types of products. You have to be very careful with the exact nature of the product. So let's come to the food packaging. And the highest effect you get from packagings is that they can reduce food losses and thus secure the food supply. And there's also the difference between non-industrialized and industrialized countries. And in non-industrialized countries, more losses happen on the upstream path, so from the acre up to the store, whereas in the industrialized countries, most losses happen at the consumer because he throws away still good food, which is sometimes simply due to a lack of knowledge. So to overcome this, we have, for instance, the European Parliament. They made a resolution and they said, okay, by 2025, we should have been able to reduce the food losses by 30%. Nice idea. 2025 is next year. Do you recognize that the food losses have been reduced by 30%? No, not at all. This is the difference between theory and practice, but nevertheless, it's important to reduce food losses. The importance remains, and it even grows by not reaching those targets. We should be able to reduce food losses by 50% up to 2030. I don't believe in this, but it's still a very strong target. But what they also said in the European Parliament is that packaging gives a positive contribution to those targets. That this is important because if you would like to ban packaging, yes, you solve the packaging problems, not quite sure, but what you don't solve are the problems of food losses. So general engineering knowledge, if you solve a problem, you do not solve, in most cases, you create a new one. Therefore, life is a compromise and we have to look for all these targets. So just to give you an impression, this is the losses in the food supply in the non-industrialized countries. I used the old FAO figures from 2012, and you see the different steps of the production chain and the minimum and the maximum of the losses in the relevant step. The point is, if you add up all these and all these, you don't end up at the same figures because these are for different product groups, just the highest and the lowest. And the highest here must not automatically be also the highest here. This is why the figures are not consistent with the total losses. But nevertheless, you recognize that they have in the non-industrialized countries total losses between 1/5 roughly and 2/3. If we look into the industrialized countries, the total losses are a little bit lower, but not too much, because especially the food to be consumed has a very high fraction of losses. And therefore, especially in industrialized countries, we must be sure that the food that we are eating is still of good quality to avoid losses. People still look at but this is another story, which is a little bit more advanced. They look at the best before date and say, okay, after the best before date, things have to be thrown away, which is not true. And therefore, please use your nose and your taste to check whether a product that is beyond the best before date could still be quite okay. It's not at its best state, that's for sure, but in most cases, it's still eatable. We can solve some of the problems with good packaging. This is this green frame there. But the point is, the effect is not as large as you expect. So at best, the best case that can happen is to halve the losses. Okay, this would be the 2030 target, but it's not for all the products, but only for a selected group of them. Good, so we need packaging on the one hand side. It reduces losses, but it's difficult to say this is simply because it's packaged. It's a lot of different reasons why packaging food losses are reduced. But in most cases, it's important to look at the packaging at its protective role. Does it really protect the filled good or not? And this is a very important question, for instance, when you go from glass to paper or from plastics to paper and try to get the same product to the consumer, you must be sure that, for instance, the shelf life of the product is drastically reduced, or the product may even not reach the consumer at all. Good. Next point is the terminology. I don't want to bore you too long with this. The only point why this is important are two things. One is a professional reason. If you are, let's say, working in one part of the industry, and if you want to talk to someone else from another branch of the industry, you must both be sure what you are talking about. And therefore, we have this type of terminology. And the next point is also the people making laws should know about the terminology. For instance, in Germany, we have the so-called packaging law. And there they always talk about the packaging producers. What they mean is the food producers and packers. So they are completely beside the terminology. So it's difficult if you're a layman to understand what they really mean. Therefore, use the terminology if you have an idea. So this is the basic thing. We have the packaging material that makes the containers. Receptacle is another word for that. For instance, a bag or a box is also a receptacle. We have the packaging components. There is an arrow missing there. All together make the packaging. Then there comes the product. Everything goes together in the operation called packing or packaging. The packaging machinery helps to do so. Finally, we have the package, which means that this is the combination of the packaging and the article. And this is what can be sold and transported and put in the warehouse and so on. This should be well known for everyone who talks about packaging. So a little bit more in detail. It's like the shells of an onion. We have the product in the middle, and then we have a series of shells going around this product. For instance, if you buy a confectionery, you already buy 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 shells in the sales package. You have the confectionery, you have the first aluminum film wrapping, you have a tray, you have a box, and you may have another wrapping around that. That's what you already buy in the sales package. So it's not the same. You cannot say the primary package is always the sales package, but this is, let's say, a detail for this. Some examples: primary packaging, secondary packaging, tertiary packaging if you transport by a truck, or if you transport by ship, you may have even more containers for this purpose. Good. A little bit more. You find all these things in the standards, norms, and other things, and I don't want to bore you with this. But we again have the packaging material, we have the container, everything is explained in these papers. So I don't do this right here. Also the packaging components and the packaging constituents. The main difference between those is a very practical one. If you would like to recycle packaging, you can separate can separate the packaging components. What you cannot easily separate are the constituents. For instance, if you have a multi-layer film, polyethylene, polyamide, polypropylene, for instance, you cannot recycle this because it's very difficult to separate the different constituents, whereas it's not very problematic to separate the closure of a bottle and the bottle itself, and perhaps the label from the bottle. That's why you should know the difference between those two expressions. Just an example, also not to bore you, I don't want to tell you everything about every fact on this slide, but what I want to show with this slide is how many different parts you are dealing with if you just drink a glass of orange juice. You have the bottle, but you don't have only the bottle. You have a lot of other things that you don't even see if you buy it, because you don't usually see the pallet with the crates on it, with the strapping tape and so on. This happens hidden behind the wall in the shop. But all these things have to be done. This is, by the way, also a point when you buy your food at a non-unpacked shop. The unpacked food doesn't come unpacked to the unpacked shop because they have their containers as well. So good, it's good to know about this terminology, especially because all people should know when they talk to each other what they are talking about. Next point, the packaging functions. Usually people are talking, I think Gordon Robertson was the first one to talk about PCCC, which means protection, containment, communication, and convenience. And I would like to add a fourth C, which is conservation, which means that the packaging also does not only keep its contents in a good form, but it should also be conserved itself by using it, reusing it in an environmentally friendly way. Good, so I take all these 5 points to give some examples. This is the protective function of the packaging. It protects the product, for instance, from oxygen, water vapor, light, and also mechanical loads. That's one part of the external forces acting on it. Another thing, many people forget the insects, which are very important in many cases. The more tropical the country is, the more importance this gets. But also external contaminants like the vapor of fuels on a gas station might be of importance if they sell cookies at the same place. So we have to take into account 2 different origins. One is the environment, giving external influences to the package. And the other is the package itself, if it has some contaminants inside, which may contaminate the product. And for the latter point, we have regulations. They are continuously updated, and therefore we have a second presentation today about this subject. So we need to know about all the different effects of the environment on the package. And this is not only depending on differences in the environment, but also on differences of the product itself. There are some products which are not sensitive, others may be extremely sensitive, and they need a different way of protection. Therefore, the knowledge which product needs which kind of protection is extremely difficult, and yeah, not many people don't know about this. So I would say the number of people who really know which product should be protected by in which way is, what would you say, in one country, a couple of hundred people, not more. Most of the people have no idea about this. Good. Then we have the so-called containment function. Some very simple things. If you have leaks inside the package, some products have no problems with this. Others may even create their own holes by having aggressive ingredients, especially in metal packagings. You have these problems. There may be some parts of the product which may get lost. For instance, flavors. If you don't have a good flavor barrier of your package, you lose flavors, for instance, or CO2 if you have carbonated beverages. Good. So 3 ways for penetration to the outside: leakage through leaks. We have permeation through intact packagings, especially important for plastics. We have corrosion, which leads to leakage. And this is an example I photographed at home when I opened a package of, I think it was ananas or something like that, and the tin plate inside was severely corroded. This may happen even today. Good. So you should know that there may be leakage, that there may be permeation, and that there may be corrosion. And you should know about the ways to overcome these problems. Then we have the communication function. And concerning this communication functions, we have a lot of legal requirements, especially in the EU, but in many other countries as well. And they tell you what has to be printed on a package. And this is a lot. This means that you need a certain area to print all these things. And what is important in terms of packaging is you should know that what is indicated on the package is really in the package, which is not 100% sure. So, for instance, the filling quantity, but also the use by or the best before date should be on each package. And it should not be a fake, it should be right. So this is a German example. This is, again, an orange juice label. This is the filling quantity. This is something that is related to the shelf life. If you buy it, it should still have enough vitamin C inside. Otherwise, you buy not the right product. And it should carry the best before date. And it should avoid the effects of oxygen and light. And if you think about an orange juice, which is in a transparent bottle, there's light, but as long as you don't have any oxygen, it has much less problems than if you open it. Okay, just this slide shows you many of the consumers don't know about this. So what use by means, or what best before means, is not understood by about 25% of the consumers, which creates a lot of additional losses. Again, communication, what does this mean? This is cheese, this is beer, and this E behind or before this number means that this product fulfills the European directive on filled quantities, which means that you are not allowed to sell much less than that what is in the product, in the package. And many companies are still not really looking at this because it's cheaper and gets more money to the companies to sell less. That's very easy, but there's some authorities checking from time to time the amount of filled goods inside, and this may create problems. Good. This is the regulation, the Council Directive 76/211, which tells you exactly how much must be in a package. I won't go too much into detail for time reasons. Nevertheless, you have to fulfill the legal requirements. There's nothing against this, and therefore this is an important thing to be known about packaging. How much time do I have? I didn't look at the time. 5 more minutes. Yeah, okay. The next point is, the next function is convenience. Is convenience a luxury or is convenience environmentally friendly? Depends on what you are looking at. You may have convenience to stack things in your fridge. You may have convenience to have easier portioning, a lot of things that make your life better and easier. Okay, does it cost additional environmental effects? It depends. Especially for fresh products, practice shows that it even gives much less losses. For instance, this is strawberries, and you may reduce drastically the losses of strawberries if you sell them packed. I know the French law. It will be difficult. If you sell meat in a vacuum package, in contrast to a modified atmosphere package, you may also reduce losses. And you may reduce losses even more if you compare this with non-packed products. So there's a lot of information that's still be needed around this, because people don't know much about this. How much is the additional loss that you have if you don't sell things packaged? It depends on the product. And if you ask people whether they would like convenience, most people say no, we can get well along without packaging. But if you look what they really buy in the shop, they buy the convenience products. So there's really a problem. It just goes over to the conservation function. The environmental function of packaging. I was really impressed what they sell in the UK. Origin Portugal. So if you ship those berries from Portugal to the UK or to Germany, it matters a lot whether you pack them or not. It would be better to buy fresh berries just at the place, but today this is a problem. So in total, packaging has a function. Packaging has a function that's also environmentally positive, but only if we have a good circular economy infrastructure. If not, we are doing the opposite. Why does this not work? It doesn't work. Okay, and finally, just a simple figure that you can have is look at the total energy you need to produce a product and its package. And roughly you can say packaging makes about 10% of the whole product. This can also be transferred to the global warming impact. It can not be transferred to the impact when plastics goes into the environment. And this is the critical thing we have to think about today. So this is packaging and packaging waste. Would you know that paper and cardboard is the most abundant packaging material, not plastic? And would you know that we have to reduce all packaging by 15% to up to 2014? Will be a challenging issue. Why is packaging waste continuously rising? The most important reason for this is because we are eating more. We eat more than 20 years ago, 10% more. Everyone can see this, but okay. If I see old movies, I recognize that people were much slimmer that time than they are today. And you also see that the performance of the countries in recovery of packaging waste is strongly different. There are some who are doing a relatively good job, and there are some who just dump their waste, still today in the EU. And finally, what we need is a circular economy. What we have today is just about, difficult to see, just about 7% of the packaging waste is recycled back again into packaging. Think about the figures we will hear later of the PPWR. It's much more that has to be achieved. Some more detailed targets, I will skip this, and also this because you get an additional explanation on this. And finally, I would say, yes, closed loop recycling is something that's very important for packaging. We don't have it today. And therefore, this is one of our major targets that we have to fulfill. So you need to know, to understand the packaging functions, you need to understand the need and the background, especially for consumer packaging. You need to know which kind of packaging you need for a specific product. And you need to be able to balance the advantages and negative effects. So therefore, recycling is one part of the story, but not the only one. Thank you very much.